Hi everyone, good afternoon. Well, it's afternoon here anyway. I don't know what time of day it is with you, but whatever time of day it is, I hope you're having a good day and I hope you are well. And today's video is a continuation of Ethony's 31 Days of Tarot. And in this video I'm going to try, and I think I've probably got about 2 more videos to do. I think I'll cover everything in the next couple of videos, and I'm hoping to get it done before we head into February, which is just tomorrow. So yeah, so that means doing a bit of filming today and getting it out there. So today I'm going to cover questions 18 through to probably 24. We'll see how we get on, and then yes, I think I'll be able to do it in one more video. So what a fun challenge this has been, and I've loved seeing everyone else's videos, and I've loved doing these videos, and it's been a fantastic way of connecting with people and learning more about the tarot community in general and about tarot in general. So a very big thank you to Ethony for putting this challenge out there and encouraging us all to take part. So let's just jump straight into the questions. I'm going to try and do these in a fairly quick fire way so we can plow on. So share one of the new things that you learnt about tarot in the last year. Well, that's quite a difficult one because I've been reading tarot now for about 27 years, and it's not that I think that I know everything there is to know about tarot. That's not it at all. It's just that in terms of new things, it's not so much about new things about tarot itself that I've learned in the last year. One of the great things I've learned in the last year is what an amazing tarot community there is out there. Obviously I knew that there were people out there like myself who are interested in tarot, but I don't think I fully appreciated just how welcoming and inclusive this community is, and I have just been bowled over by the kindnesses of people in the tarot community in terms of welcoming me and connecting with me, and just seeing the way that tarot people treat each other. Largely, of course, there are exceptions to every rule, but certainly the crowd that I have found myself in contact with, both here on YouTube and also in Facebook groups and in other areas, have just been fantastic. So perhaps it's not so much that I've learned something new, but I have had reiterated to me that tarot people are very fine people indeed. So that's number 18. Share which tarot deck out there gives you the heebie-jeebies. Well, I had to think about this one, and actually in either later in this video or in the next video I'm going to talk about a deck that I broke up with, partly because it gave me the heebie-jeebies, but I've taken this question to mean the heebie-jeebies in a good way. I actually quite like getting the heebie-jeebies. I love horror films and scary books and things like that. I love misty, mysterious, eerie days and that kind of thing. So for me, heebie-jeebies can be a good thing. So I'm interpreting this question to mean heebie-jeebies in the good sense, and I'll come on to the heebie-jeebies in not quite such a good sense when I talk about the deck that I broke up with. But in terms of heebie-jeebies in a good, it's quite difficult to say that without sounding like you're speaking in tongues. So in terms of heebie-jeebies in a good sense, I am going to suggest that, or I'm not going to suggest, I'm going to tell you that my answer to that is the recently acquired Barbara Walker Tarot, and in a tin, obviously. And I love this deck. It's not that I think that the deck is sinister or anything, but I think there are some very unsettling cards in this deck, and they're not necessarily the cards that you would think of as being unsettling. So I'm not talking here about the Death card or the Tower card or the Ten of Swords and all that kind of stuff that we might automatically think of when we think of difficult cards. I just think some of the cards, and some of them are cards that you might think of as difficult, but some of them aren't, and they just have some really eerie, interesting images. So here's one that is a bit of a traditional. Let me just put the light down a little bit. Here's one that is a bit of a traditional spooky card, and that is the Nine of Swords. And you can see in this one that we have got this rather sinister picture of a woman clinging to a tree, and the tree itself looked like it's a bit of a sinister character, with these figures surrounding her, these cloaked and hooded figures surrounding her. It looks like it's going to be some kind of ritual sacrifice or something. And of course this is the card of nightmares, so what a nightmare. Then we have a very eerie and sinister interpretation of Kali, who very powerful goddess, who in this seems to be eating the entrails of somebody that she has just killed. So Heebie Jeebies right there. This card is the Six of Cups, and it's the card that represents childhood, and I think this does a good job of reminding us just what it was like when you're a very small child, what it's like to see a huge adult towering above you and how scary that can be. Another kind of potential group sacrifice, or certainly some kind of ritual going on there, in the Five of Wands, Moonlight Night, white hooded figures. I've got the book that goes with this deck, which I haven't looked at in great detail yet, but I think there's a lot in there, or I know there's a lot in there about the mythology behind these cards, so that's something I'm looking forward to reading more about. There we have the Eight of Wands. Now the Eight of Wands is the card that usually I think of as being pretty positive, and I usually think of it being about forward motion. I think of the Rider-Waite card, where you see the wands that are, in my mind, are going upwards into the sky. Some people will perhaps interpret it as the wands coming downwards, but I think of it as the wands flying upwards into the sky in forward positive motion. That's partly because the very first deck that I had, Tarot of the Old Path, shows the wands as broomsticks, and they're definitely flying up into the sky. So I tend to think of that as a positive interpretation. But here it's interpreted, I don't know if you can see the word very clearly there, it's interpreted as fall. And there's a picture of a man falling off, or a person, I think it's a man, falling off a winged horse. So that's quite sinister. Here we have the Princess of Wand, Atargatis or Atargatis. Yeah, I think Heebie and Jeebie are words that I would use to describe Atargatis. If I met Atargatis in a dark alleyway, I would be somewhat disturbed, and I would be also disturbed if I met this chap, Baal, King of Pentacles. And here we have the Ace of Swords, Doom, in this deck. We have Opposition, Seven of Swords. I love the little cat. In fact, I love the whole card. That's the thing, I don't necessarily think of these cards as heebie-jeebies in a sinister sense, although they are sinister in a good way. And here's the Six of Swords, and again, you know, this is about passage, and normally the Six of Swords cards I find extremely comforting. I think of it as being passage onwards, safe passage onwards from a difficult situation, difficult circumstance, and that certainly is what this card could mean in this deck. But even then, it has this sense of oppression and darkness and portent about it. So yeah, heebie-jeebies in the Barbara Walker Tarot. But as I say, I love the deck. I've wanted it for a long time. It's lovely to have it in the tin size. But there's a lot of studying that I think I need to do to fully understand the imagery, and it's certainly striking imagery. Share one tarot myth that you used to believe and why you stopped believing it. I suppose I've never really believed tarot myths, and when I think of tarot myths, I think of things like you've got to buy your own deck, well, you've got to buy your own deck, and also maybe another myth would be that there are cards that are inherently negative. So I very quickly realised that that wasn't the case, that cards aren't negative in and of themselves, but it all depends on their place in the reading, and it depends on the question you've asked, and it depends on the interpretation and so on. But maybe one myth that I worried might be true when I was very first getting into tarot was this notion that you had to buy your own deck, and I quickly stopped believing that, because that you had to get somebody else to buy your own deck. Sorry, that you had to get somebody else to buy your deck for you is what I meant. You knew that I meant that, but that is what I meant. So I quickly stopped believing that, because the truth of the matter is, if I had waited until somebody was going to buy me a tarot deck, then I probably would still be waiting, because it's not something that really happened unless you're already interested in tarot, by and large. You know, people don't generally come and thrust tarot decks at you. So I bought my own deck, and the rest is history. So I quickly stopped believing that. Um, Share some of your favourite deck storage. Well, if I'd been more organised, I could have brought with me a couple of tarot bags. But my deck storage, I have to say, is not terribly exciting at the moment, and it's also not terribly well organised. So I've got some decks that are still in their boxes, even their tuck boxes, which I don't like. I've got some decks that are in drawstring bags and so on, and you know, that's fine, but I don't have very many of them. And I've got some decks on bookcases. So one of my tasks for the year ahead is to organise my deck storage, and there are some fantastic ideas for deck storage. I've seen Annika's videos about making your own tarot boxes, and I'll link below. Amazing video about how you can make your own deck storage, your own homemade deck boxes, and I'm going to do that. Two Spirit shared some ideas for deck storage, including some drawers that you could get at a local stationery company here in the UK. I'm going to look into those. And I'm just generally going to try and reorganise my deck storage, because I now have more decks than I used to, and I've got some more on order, so I'm going to have to do something about the storage quite soon. Share the card that was the hardest for you to get when you were first learning the tarot, and how do you feel about that card now? Well, maybe I should have brought it. I'm not very organised for this video. But the card that I'm thinking of in this case is the Temperance card from the Rider-Waite deck. And I actually drew my own version of the Temperance card in the previous 31 Days of Tarot video. That was the card that I picked to draw. I drew it as art. And the reason I maybe struggled to get this to start with was that, well, one, I didn't quite understand what was meant by temperance when I first started reading tarot. And also I found the image a bit difficult to relate to. So it seemed to me very Christian. There was this angel standing there. I probably was less comfortable with that kind of imagery than I am now. I have no problem with Christian imagery, because I've developed my own kind of conception of what the value of Christianity is. So now I've got more of a nuanced understanding about what temperance means, and see it as a synthesis of opposites or just differences. I see it as a card that represents things being more than the sum of their parts. I see it as a card of great possibility. So I think of the angel and the way that it's pouring, or he or she is pouring water from one goblet to the other. And that water, certainly in the Rider-Waite card and in many other cards, Marseille deck included, is the water is flowing in a very improbable way. So it's going in this kind of this wave formation that looks almost like a sound wave or electrical wave, and it's not flowing downwards out of the goblet, it's flowing diagonally from one goblet to the other, as though gravity is not affecting it, which to me just speaks of doing the impossible. And so temperance for me is very much a card that is about how things can unite, disparate things can unite, and what comes from that union is something greater than we could have anticipated before the union. So I love that card now, and I always feel a bit of a thrill of delight when temperance appears in a reading for me or for somebody that I'm reading for. I think it's a very special card. All the cards are special, of course, but I actually now feel, having gone from having at one point not really felt any connection to temperance, and I feel a very deep connection to that card. So that's my answer to that one. Yes, here we are. Share a tarot deck that you just had to break up with because it no longer resonates for you. There have been various decks that I've got over the years that I've not connected with very quickly, and maybe have passed on, sold, perhaps. And there have been some decks that I've done that with, and then I've regretted it. And I thought, oh, if only I kept that one, and probably I'll buy again at some point. But one that I broke up with, and that I really felt didn't resonate with me, and that I don't feel any particular desire to repurchase, is the Hermetic Tarot. And I mentioned that there was an element of heebie-jeebies in there. Not so much heebie-jeebies, but I just didn't particularly connect with the artwork. Although I could appreciate that it was very good artwork and very detailed, but I didn't really connect with it. Partly because that's not my tradition. The kind of very ceremonial magic, ritual magic element of things is not my tradition. I've read about it, I've studied a bit of it, I appreciate it, I can see the value of it, but it's just not really for me. Although I love, for example, the Thoth deck, and I think some of the elements are the same in those decks, but for me the Hermetic Tarot just didn't really connect. So that's my answer to that. And finally, for this video, if you could design a 79th tarot card that everyone would use, what would it look like and what would it represent? Well, I've thought about this, and I have to say that I don't think it would look like anything, because the card that I'm thinking of is, well, I think I would maybe call it the Void, although that doesn't, even that doesn't say what it really would represent. I'm thinking actually about a card that represents the state of being that the Fool is stepping out from. So I think of the Fool as being the beginning of duality, the beginning of the soul's progress in this world, the beginning of reality as we understand it to be, even though it's connected at a very deep spiritual level, you might say. But the question in my mind is, what is there before the Fool? And that is a card that I would invent if I could. But of course it's impossible, because what we're talking about here is the realm that is beyond all opposites and existence. And so the moment you have the Fool, you have not Fool. The moment you have up, you have down. The moment you have left, you have right, old, young, all these opposites. And so when the Fool steps out into the world of opposites and begins this amazing journey of life, we are to some extent in the world of duality. And so my thinking about the 79th card is what is beyond that. Now I know that some people would say, but the Fool represents non-duality, because it's nothing. But even nothing is a thing. So the moment you think of nothing, you've immediately created something, because nothing has an opposite of something. So I'm talking about what lies beyond or before nothing and something. Does that make sense? Probably not, but it makes sense in my brain. So that's the card that I would invent, and for want of a better word, I would call it Void. And yes, so that's my answers to these questions, and I'll probably turn the camera off and then immediately make another video for the next set of questions. But just so that you don't have to watch too long a video, we'll break for now, and I will see you again very soon.